I doubt that many of you realised that this last Thursday, just a few days ago, was Ascension Day. It's a day in the church's calendar when we take note of the event our readings talk about today, the ascension of Jesus Christ to be at the right hand of God. We Protestants hardly pay attention to Ascension Day, partly because it always falls on a Thursday, exactly 40 days after Easter. But also we hardly pay attention because it's hard for us in this empirical, rational, scientific and technological day and age to spend much time really thinking about Jesus ascending up to the heavens, like some kind of launch of a space satellite. We just can't imagine it. And we don't really know what it signifies anyway. But let's give it a go. Anglican priest and Professor of Divinity, Barbara Brown Taylor, has written a wonderful book entitled An Altar in the World, in which she recalls that when, as a young woman in her teens, she decided that she was a believer. She joined a church to learn about God, but instead learned to be suspicious of the world. That mirrors my experience too. As a child and young teenager, on a Sunday morning, I went to the Church of Scotland with my parents and my brother. But in the afternoon, I went to the Brethren Sunday School, conservative, fundamentalist, rather exclusive. But they played games. They had contests of Bible memorization with prizes. Their summer trips were much better than the Sunday school of the Church of Scotland. They even had a weekend away at Wiston Lodge in the Scottish borders, about which I still have very fond memories. The Brethren Sunday School taught me a lot of Bible stuff, for which I'm grateful. They also taught me to sing lots of little songs and choruses with natty little tunes with simple verses to memorize. One went like this. I won't sing it, so don't worry. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down in tender love. So be careful, little eyes, what you see. That was the first verse. There are many more. Be careful, little I won't give you them all. Be careful, little hands, what you touch. Be careful, little hands, what you touch. For the Father up above is looking down in tender love. So be careful, little hands, what you touch. Be careful, little feet, where you go, la, 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 etc., etc., etc. Be careful, little ears, what you hear, la, 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 etc., etc., etc. And so on, and so on. It went on forever. But looking back now on that jolly little ditty, which I would sing with enthusiasm, be careful, little eyes, hands, feet, ears, it is clear that the message it sends out is wrong. It sends out a message that the world is a threatening, sinful, dirty, disgusting place, and a follower of Jesus Christ will be constantly on guard and keep the world at arm's length. the idea still has currency today. The idea that Christianity is not about life in this world, but the next one. That worldly is something Christianity is not. That Christians are slightly otherworldly. That is, a little or a lot uncomfortable with the world, even alienated. That Christian attention is better focused on eternity than the life of the city or the village or the nation or the world in the here and now. That Christianity is pie in the sky when you die by and by. That holiness, true, pure spirituality, is to transcend life in this world, this body, this community, this time, and this place. That kind of thinking has a long history, all the way back to the ancient Greeks, who believed that reality is divided into two realms, matter and spirit. And spirit is a lot better than matter. Also, the Greek view that human beings are divided into body and soul. And soul is a lot better than body. In fact, your body can get you into a lot of trouble. Many early interpreters of Jesus and parts of the New Testament were influenced by that Greek dualistic way of thinking, even though Jesus himself never talked like that. Never. Jesus was a Jew, and Judaism is quite different from Greek dualism. Judaism holds that there are not two different realms, but only one. That the world is a holy place, that we find God in the world, and holiness in life lived in the world. The early Christians were influenced by Greek thinking. They couldn't avoid it. But they had another problem. At that time, their world was not a friendly place to them. In fact, their world was hostile and dangerous. In a matter of a few decades, Rome itself turned against the early Christians and began several centuries of brutal persecution, and yes, fed to the lions, literally. So the idea that Christians ought to withdraw from the world, to escape from the world, made kind of sense. Get away from it all, the travel adverts plead, at least pre-COVID. And who can argue with that? So it is logical that sometimes the church and religious faith become a way to do just that, to get away from the world. Everyone needs a break, a time away, a holiday, some downtime to sort things out, think things through, to simply be for a while. And even better, you can do that permanently. Either literally withdrawing from the world and become a pious recluse, a hermit, a monk, a nun. There was a first century Syrian monk called Simeon, nicknamed Simeon Stylites. He spent 37 years living on top of a 15-meter high stone pillar. What was the purpose of that? But more probably, getting away from the world means withdrawing into yourself, into a kind of studied indifference to the world, except for a few sentences in the New Testament, which tell us something quite different. The first is in a prayer Jesus prayed at the table of the Last Supper. Time is running out. It's time for summing up, for final words. The end is near. And so Jesus prays to God for his dearest friends, his disciples. He asks God to protect them, to keep them at one in unity with each other, to give them joy in their life and their work, and then this. And then this. I am not asking you to take them out of the world. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. Into the world. Into the world. It could not be more clear. Jesus wants his followers to be in the world. Wants his people in every age not to try to escape from the world or transcend the world, but to engage with the world, to live in it thoroughly, to enjoy it, to live their lives fully in the world, and to love the world, just as God loved the world. To respect and honour and serve the world just as he did. The second sentence is one of my favourite Bible verses. We heard it read earlier by Andy. It comes from the book of Acts. It's really a question. Why are you looking up into the sky? Why are you looking up? We know the occasion, the Ascension, commemorated, as I said, last Thursday. 40 days after Easter, the risen Christ is still with his disciples. Now he will return to God. Now, modern Christians stumble all over this event. I do. When trying to take it literally, it can't be literal. We stumble trying to understand it in terms of space and time and mechanics and kinetics and physics. Forget it. It's the idea it represents. And it's an idea among the most important and precious we have. He ascended into heaven and sitteth on the right hand of God, we affirm in the Apostles' Creed. We affirm that Jesus Christ is not dead, but alive and sitting at the right hand of God the Father. Jesus Christ, that is to say, is the authority, the final authority. Not COVID, not any sickness, not suffering, injustice, oppression, not racism or sexism, not even death itself. Jesus Christ is the final authority. That's what ascended into heaven and sitteth on the right hand of God means. And it is at the very heart of what we believe. And it's great news. When the ascension happened, whatever it was, the disciples were confused, amazed, astonished. And just then, two young men appeared. And they asked a question, simply. Men of Galilee, why do you stand here looking up to heaven? Why do you stand here looking up to heaven? It's time to stop staring and get going. Time to stop pondering eternity and start thinking about Jerusalem, the city. Time to stop whatever you were thinking by way of withdrawing from the world and recommit yourself to it and enjoy it. The text continues, then they returned to Jerusalem. Thank God they did. They didn't go off into the desert to meditate, they went to work. The world, this world, is where the followers of Jesus Christ are supposed to be. The world with all its messiness and despair and violence and corruption, but also its joy, its beauty. The world is still the object of God's love. This is the last day of Christian Aid Week, and Christian Aid obey 100% and embody 100% that imperative so well. Working in 30 countries alongside the most desperately poor and needy on the planet, Christian Aid, along with their partners, live out the authentic gospel. And in the words of a motto they once used, we believe in life before death. The world is where God's people will live and work and love and serve and enjoy. And Jesus Christ promised that the world is precisely where they will find that joy and satisfaction. Dietrich Bonhoeffer had every reason in the world to keep the world at arm's length, to keep his religious commitments in the realm of the spirit, totally separate and safe from what was going on around him in the world. Maybe you know the story. Most of his fellow German Christians managed to do just that in the 1930s as the Nazis came to power. As individual liberties began to disappear, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of ownership, and as Jews at first were blamed for everything, then tormented, demonized, their property confiscated, their businesses destroyed, as they were finally rounded up and shipped away to concentration camps and exterminated. Many German Christians simply looked the other way. It's not our business, it's politics. It's just the way things are in the world. Our concern is religious, matters of the spirit, our souls, our future in heaven, not what is transpiring in the world around us. There are dreadful, dreadful pictures of bishops, both Catholic and Protestant, giving Hitler the Nazi salute. In Germany, Bonhoeffer, a gentle intellectual, a lifelong pacifist because he grew up in the First World War, came to the conclusion that his faith demanded more of him, and he renounced pacifism. His faith would not allow him not to see what was happening. You might know the story how it ends. He joined the resistance and became part of the plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Not in spite of his Christian faith, but because of his Christian faith. Sadly, the plot failed. Bonhoeffer was arrested and executed a few days before the war ended. He was only 39. His letters and papers from prison, a modern Christian classic, brilliant. He wrote this from his prison cell to a friend, that Christianity does not shield us from life, but, I quote Bonhoeffer, plunges us into all the dimensions of life. And Bonhoeffer went on, during the last year or so, I have come to appreciate the worldliness of Christianity. I thought I could acquire faith by trying to live a holy life. How wrong was I? I discovered that it is only by living completely in this world that one learns to believe properly. To know and to honor God is to keep your eyes and ears and hands open to the miracle of every day in this world, and your heart open vulnerably to your loved ones, your friends, your neighbours, even strangers and enemies, to live more thoroughly in the here and now. Men of Galilee, women of Galilee, men and women of Crown Court, Why do you stand here looking up to the sky? This Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come again in the same way as you saw him leave. But in the meantime, let us hang together, devote ourselves to prayer, service, and fellowship, enjoy the world, and be his witnesses. For God's sake, be his witnesses.